Oh, maybe just whistle. You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.
Thank you everyone for joining me today. My name is Angela Williamson and I am the host of She Talks Cinema. And I am so excited today. And the reason that I'm excited, I know she's waving at you. The reason I'm excited is because I have Shana Gagnon. Did I say it right?
Shana. You got it the first time. Shana,
yeah. And her name is spelled uniquely, so you'll see that in the credits. So that's why I wanted to make sure I pronounced it correctly. But Shana is so special to me, and you wouldn't believe it because when you hear us talk, you'll think we've been friends since we've been little. But she is the type of friend that I met a few years ago on the film festival circuit, and I just felt like we had been friends for years. And she has done so many wonderful things for independent filmmakers, but especially women in independent film. And so when I was talking to the executive producer and just singing her praises about her last project that she did, that did phenomenally well, not only just on Facebook, but on YouTube, the executive producer asked me, he said, well, why don't you have Shana on this podcast? I'm like, I don't know. Why don't I? So today I'm so happy to have Shana here because she has this amazing project coming up that she'll talk about probably throughout our podcast, but we're going to have her get in more depth at the end because hopefully there's a way that we can still support this project because it's a phenomenal project that she has going. But I want everyone to get to know Shana, and you will immediately know why I connected with her right away because she is such an amazing woman, but amazing friend as well. So welcome so much to the show, Shana, and thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much. And so I want to go right into the questions because immediately when I met you, we just started connecting and we just started talking about things, regarding independent films. But, I don't think I ever asked you this question. And I would love for our audience to know, how did you actually start in entertainment? Because I think you started as an actress, but I'm not quite sure. So I would love to hear how you started in entertainment.
Okay, awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Angela. And everything you said was so nice. And I feel the same way about Angela. You're an amazing filmmaker, educator, woman in film, friend, someone I have so much respect for and so much confidence in you, and I look up to you. So I just appreciate you so much as a person, and I'm very humbled and grateful to be here. And I will make myself slow down so I don't skip over my words. So your question was, how did I start in the entertainment industry, correct? So this would bring me back to, early childhood, how I was raised, my upbringing. My mother, who is actually a nurse practitioner in cardiology, made a conscious decision that she wanted to expose her children to the arts at a young age. She saw the value in that. So I'm very close to my mother. She's my best friend. She's and my father was a wonderful person too. And he, but it was like, I feel like it was like her conscious choice to expose us to the arts. And he was more an athlete, wrestling coach, went away to college on a wrestling scholarship. And I think like I get my competitive side from him, like always wanting to achieve excellence and to be at the top of my game. But for my mother, it was this conscious choice to expose her daughters to the arts. So she put me and my two older sisters, I'm the youngest of three, in ballet. at a young age. I started doing ballet at 3 years old. So I was in ballet from age 3 to 17 years old. So that would be what I would say exposed me to live theater really young. And all I knew was that, you know, growing up being in the Nutcracker Ballet every year, and then eventually being in a very respected competitive ballet company, the Michigan Ballet Theater, up until my senior year of high school, it exposed me to theater, and I loved being, you know, backstage and in the wings and the lights. And I feel like that's where I fell in love with storytelling. And as a little ballerina, I would think to myself, I know how to make the story of the Nutcracker better. And here's what I would do with Clara and Dresselmeyer and change the storyline. And I remember my mom saying to me, you're really like a director. Like this is, you know, and I knew I never wanted to, in my adult life, move on to being a professional ballerina. I did it. It was a good way to learn discipline and focus. And it's a big part of who I am as a filmmaker today. But I never dreamed of, oh, I want to join a professional ballet company when I leave high school. And a lot of the girls I danced with did. They joined New York City Ballet, American Ballet Theater. Like they were that good. And I was in that group, but my heart wasn't in it. I always wanted to be an actress, always. But I remember there were times in ballet class where I was memorizing Shakespeare monologues in my head because I just wanted to be an actor my whole life. But I did some plays in high school, but I was never acting as much as I wanted to. And then once I did some plays in high school and did well in a play I did my junior year of high school. I was 16 years old. The play was called A Bird of Prey. It was a very modern, current, present day play, very dramatic. And I had a monologue in that play, which gave me an opportunity to showcase my ability as an actor. And at that point, I didn't really have any formal training as an actor or anything. I just knew it was what I was meant to do, especially drama. And that play was a competitive play, and we traveled, and I started to get accolades and awards for that part when I was playing this part in this play. And then I knew when I auditioned for Western Michigan University, which is in Kalamazoo, Michigan, I auditioned to become part of their theater program. It was very competitive. And I got a scholarship based on that audition. You had to do a 1-minute dramatic monologue and then 1-minute comedic right afterwards. You had to stand behind a little piece of tape with a panel of judges looking at you, and you were with your other fellow high school students, seniors, that were watching you. And it was a very high pressure situation, but I not only got accepted into the theater program, I got a scholarship. So that's when I realized, like, this is where my heart is. This is what I want to do. So as an 18-year-old freshman in college at Western Michigan, that's where I kind of started my path as an actor in theater. And it didn't merge into film until I moved to Los Angeles in the year 2004. So that's a big, long-winded journey and explanation, but it's not as easy for people in the Midwest and states like Michigan to break into film and television because it's just not really here. It's just, there's not a lot of production here, which is the reason that I did theater, because that was accessible to me, and ballet because that was accessible to me. But it was also the reason I chose to move to Los Angeles for 15 years of my life in 2004. So
And so
that's how it all started.
No, this is great because it leads to a couple of questions. And so we might skip over some of the order that I sent to you.
Yeah.
But so when you come to LA, I mean, you are now moving from theater into film and maybe television. But I'd love to know, what did you think was like your biggest challenge when you finally came to LA and being in entertainment? And if that had anything to do with gender, let us know, because of what the title of the podcast is. But it's interesting. Yeah. People, there's people watching all over, and they may be thinking about making the same decision that you made.
Sure. Yeah. Great point. Great questions. So biggest challenge, your first question was biggest challenge going from Michigan to LA and transferring from the world of theater to the world of film and television, and what were the challenges? I'm gonna say, and this hasn't changed to this day, and I think this is like, if I ever led a TED talk or something, or led a seminar, this is still my biggest challenge to this day, no matter where I am, is merging past your own fears and whatever it is that's stopping you. It's always you, right? So theater is something I knew. It was within my comfort zone. So it's not like I moved to LA, got an agent right away, and started filming independent films and television. I did start indie film pretty quickly, but I did what I was comfortable doing. I was only 20 years old when I decided I'm transferring from Western Michigan University to Cal State Northridge. I had never visited LA, not even once. I had no friends there, no family, didn't visit the college campus. I remember I got out the internet. This is before social media. Like, it was probably a few years before social media. It was, I don't even think MySpace was a thing yet in 04. That was more like 06. And I looked up Cal State Northridge and I was like, okay, it's close to Hollywood. I made old school phone calls, called the theater department. And I talked to this girl that worked in the theater department at Cal State Northridge. They call Cal State Northridge CSUN, CSUN.
Yeah.
And when I got there, I would say to my fellow students, oh, CSUN. They're like, no one calls it that, Shana, it's CSUN. And I was like, oh, like, I'm so used to the Michigan, like Western Michigan University, Michigan State, you know, but they're like, it's CSUN, it's not CSUN. And I was like, okay. But I joined their theater department because I knew, like, most likely actors in LA are going to be doing, you know, if they're doing theater there, they're probably going to be doing film and TV. And I was right about that. I joined the theater department. I auditioned for a play immediately. I booked the lead role. The chair of the theater department at the time, his name is James DePaul. He cast me as Hecuba in The Greeks. And it was a huge part. And I was this girl fresh from Michigan with a strong Michigan accent. And I remember I auditioned for him. I used that monologue that I used my junior year in high school. I was able to recycle that for years, and he loved the audition. He gave me the lead role, but I remember he said, we need to work on your accent. And I was like, what accent? I have an accent? I don't hear it. He's like, just listen. And I realized I had a very, very traditional Midwest nasal accent, and people in Michigan have a strong accent. They just don't think it's an accent, but they do. So I got that part, and I was introduced to a huge group of friends and, I always say colleagues now. I never say, I'm blanking on the word. It starts with a C. In college, what is the word for when it's co-something? Colleagues, not co-workers.
Yes.
Your co-eds.
Yes.
Your co-eds.
I'll think of it.
It's co-eds.
Cohabits or something like that, or yeah.
It's like your co-eds. Yeah.
Yeah.
But my comrades, my people, you know, and this cast was huge, and it was a bunch of different plays based on Greek mythology. And I met like people from all over the world that moved to LA just like I did, and people that moved 3,000 miles away from their homes to live there like I did. And I rarely met people from Michigan, but I would meet lots of people from Massachusetts or New York or different countries. And I got funneled into this huge group of friends, and I keep in touch with so many of those people that I first met in LA to this day. And then my professors in college over there, I would turn on Gilmore Girls or a different TV show, and I'd be like, that's my theater teacher. They totally have a guest spot or a recurring role on this TV show. And in Michigan, you weren't used to that because the industry wasn't here. Yeah. So, but the thing that I did in LA, like if I look back and if I had to go back to 04 and I could take a time machine, this is advice I would give to people afraid to take the leap, because television seems so unattainable and like a pipe dream and so mysterious to people coming from the Midwest. But I think I was afraid to really go for it with auditioning for television. Like I always thought I was a size 4 when I moved to LA, and I was like, I'll do it once I lose more weight, or I'll do it once this or that. And like in 04, actresses were expected to be stick skinny, like really. And like that, these ideas that were false got into my head as a young, like I had turned 21 like 5 days before I got there. So I was a young actress. But I also kind of got discouraged from delving into the business side of things, because there's the artistic side And then there's the business side. And we all know these are kind of two different things, right? But they're both equally important. And I remember asking one of my professors, like, how do you get an agent? How do you get a manager? How do you go about that? And he was like, I'm not here to help anybody with their career. Don't even focus on that. Just focus on your craft as an artist. You have plenty of time. And I really took that to heart and kind of allowed that to navigate several years for me out there. And time got wasted because you can still do plays and you can still book plays, which I did like over 50 plays as an actress and booked lead roles in almost everything I auditioned for it throughout college. But I didn't focus on getting the agent or getting the manager, and I should have done that immediately. So I could have started earning money as an actor because I was good enough to book co-stars and guest stars and things like that. But also do your plays also because in theater, anyway, some people might know this and some people might not. If my theater colleagues are listening in the huge theater community from Michigan to New York to LA, you do it for free. You never get paid. There's no income for that. So you're doing it because you love it, unless you book regional theater or equity theater and everyone's getting a salary. But most theater in LA, and not just in LA, but most theater, even professional theaters out there, their actors aren't getting paid anything. They're just doing it because they love it. So you're literally working a full-time job, a grind, or in your 20s, working in a restaurant, and then you're spending your afternoons, nights, and weekends grinding at a theater, and sometimes companies are even dues paying, and so then you're paying monthly dues, you're paying to play, pay to play, right? So I built a great resume as a theater artist, but I also started booking some independent film, especially in college, student films. But there's like a lot of conversations that I could have in this podcast. One is the world of theater. Yes. One's the world of independent film. And the other is like industry, like television, movies that have a huge budget and are, the word isn't corporate, but like if they're fully funded through like Hulu, Netflix, Amazon. Yes. That's a different beast than I produced, wrote, and directed an indie short film, which we'll talk about. But sometimes what I learned early on in my time in LA in my early 20s is that you can book a short film or a feature film, and dependent upon the team you have behind you as an actor, you might not ever see your footage. They might just never pay you and also never even give you anything for your reel. This happens to a lot of actors, and it's very frustrating. So the advice I would give to anyone in the industry, men, women, anyone, is when you're signing on to do an independent film, ask your questions, do your research, get agreements in writing. Emails will be your best friend as opposed to verbal agreements, because it's your time, and if you aren't being paid and you're volunteering your time, make sure you enroll with a team you trust that they're going to turn it out, and it's a director behind the project that's going to provide you with the footage, and you have clear agreements. What's the goal? Are you trying to get into the film festival circuit? Do you just want a scene for your demo reel? Because actors learn the longer they're in this industry to be selective about what they say yes to. Because what I just described, directors and filmmakers not finishing their projects and just leaving their actors high and dry, and you put in so much work and you don't even get to see your footage, that happens constantly. So I think eventually when I became a filmmaker in LA, I think my experience as an actor, experiencing, not only not being compensated monetarily to do an indie film, which sometimes we sign up to, that's fine if you want to build your demo reel, but when you don't even get your footage and you don't even get to see a final product, actors often, we sign on to be treated poorly in a really unprofessional way because we're just so starving to do the work. We just love the process. We love the work. But you have to decide for yourself as a business person in the industry, what is acceptable to you and what's unacceptable to you. You set the standard, and it took me years to learn this. But to actors specifically, it's absolutely okay to respectfully say, no, thank you. This isn't a project I want to sign on for. There's unclear guidelines. You're not answering emails, or I don't know what the result is. I don't know what the goal is. But when you have a great independent film team and a collaboration of great professionals, that independent film can be so rewarding in so many ways, as you and I know, Angela. What I would say for your question about any challenges specifically with being a female in the industry, I think it's just the general, as a woman in film, if your desire is to be a director of photography, or you're in a leadership role, is you need to give yourself permission to be okay being the boss. Because like most industries, film is male dominated, and most of the directors I've worked with are men. And if you don't edit your own films, which I don't, editing is not my thing. Most of the editors I've worked with are men, and they've been amazing. And you have to be okay being the boss and saying, no, I want it this way, not that, and not just to submit to whatever, again, like I said earlier, the challenge is always getting past your own fears, your own hangups. And, like the director of photography I normally work with, her name is Andrea Chamberlain. She filmed Secret. She filmed the Mod proof of concept teaser trailer. We're about to do another project together. And when she's on set, for a lot of the film crew, when she's the director of photography, she is the boss to the sound engineer or to the first assistant director. And I let her do that now as a director and DP. Her and I have a really great relationship in song and dance on set, because we know how each person works.
Yes.
So I think it's just, as a female, just giving yourself permission to be in a leadership role and understanding how to do that you have to be an authority figure and be clear on expectations, but also to do it with respect, with kindness, make sure your sets are a safe place, that people are having fun, that people are laughing, people are, I'm always worried. The theater kid in me is always like, does anyone need water? Does anyone need a break? And my director of photography, Andrea, will be like, Shana, that's not your job. Let your first AD do that.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to do all these things, but theater kids are scrappy and we'll just do it all,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. You mentioned the word secret, and
Yes.
that's the title of your short film that was so successful on the film festival circuit. So I want us to talk about that so that people know about it. And one of the things I've always thought about, one of the questions I think I know the answer to it, but I never really asked you, is why did you write Secret? And then the other follow-up is that, why do you think that it was so successful on the film festival circuit? Because it definitely was.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much for that, first of all. I appreciate that. So why did I write Secret, was your question. So I actually had mentioned my dad in the beginning of this conversation. My dad passed away from cancer in 2002. He had kidney cancer. He was, like, on paper, the healthiest guy, athlete. He was never a smoker. He was never a drinker. And then, I don't know exactly what year it is. I remember I was 15 years old. He got diagnosed with cancer, and he had 4 years to live. And it was just kidney cancer. They found a tumor in his kidney the size of a football. They removed it, but by the time they had removed it, it had already spread to his lungs. And renal cell carcinoma is not, like, at least at that time, I'm not up to date as of 2020, but at the time that he had it in the late 90s to early 2000s, there was no treatment for it. Chemo doesn't treat kidney cancer. Nothing really does. So he lost his life to cancer. And this was in 2002. So he passed when I was 19. And he passed in 2002, and I started filming Secret in 2016. The first part of it I filmed in 2016, and then I realized I needed to get more footage, so we wrapped in 2017. So that many years later, huge gap between my father's passing and actually producing and making this film. But the inspiration for Secret came from a few different things. Secret is a short film I wrote about grief. It's about a young widow whose husband recently passed away. She's having to give her horse away because she can't afford her horse anymore. She says in a phone conversation with her mother, like, I played the lead actress in this, but I'll talk about her like she's a character for story purposes. She says, I'm going to lose my house. I have to give my horse away. My husband just died. And then throughout the 15-minute film, we're seeing flashbacks of our protagonist and her husband. And storytelling in film is so interesting, and this is what I love the most about the journey of being a filmmaker. I learned through the process of writing Secret that the best stories tell themselves. And you might start with an initial idea and go, this is what my film's going to be about. It's going to be about this theme, right? Secret, but what I would encourage to fellow storytellers, fellow filmmakers, is that allow the story to evolve organically and tell the story that wants to be told. It kind of, it can form its own life form. So, like I said, my father had passed in 2002, and my mother, instead of getting remarried or dating or anything, she, in the latter half of her life after my father passed, she got a horse. She always wanted to get a horse, and she never had a horse when she was married. So she got this horse, and she was still living in Michigan, and at the time I was in LA, and that became her new passion. And one of the times I had to come home from LA to visit, she told me she needed to give her horse away. And there was a reason for it. It's not the same as what happened in Secret, but she actually had 3 horses at the time, and she needed to give this first horse that she got after my dad passed. She was going to send him to Texas to go live with her friend Nancy because he was getting older, and the harsh winters in Michigan can be hard. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go support my mom. I'm going to be with her when she gives her horse away. So I remember it was like 5 a.m, dark outside, October, I think was the month. It was a very dramatic experience. And I was in the car with my mom, and she was just very quiet, wasn't talking. There was sad music on the radio, and I was just very emotional because I'm an empath. I always have been. And I was just like, I just felt emotional. I remember there was some tears, and I felt like this was a movie I was watching. It was like an out-of-body experience. And my mom got out of the car. There was like fog coming up, and I saw this horse led by this cowboy come down this path and get on a trailer. And he was like, he had a cowboy hat on. He was a man of few words. Mm-hmm. And my mom had to say goodbye to her horse. And it was just this very dramatic, very sad moment that I was an audience member to, and I kind of witnessed it. And I thought, well, I'll make a 5-minute short film about this woman who has to give her horse away. It'll be maybe a little black and white little film, and I'll have someone film it, one of my film friends, and just that moment where they load the horse onto the trailer, which is in Secret. Well, Angela knows from being an audience member and being in a lot of festivals with me with her movie, which is also amazing, by the way, My Life with Rosie. She's seen Secret, and she knows that's not all that happens. There's not just a horse that's given away and loaded onto the trailer. That's one scene in a 15-minute film. But what happened was, as the director and storyteller, this became a movie about something much bigger. It was a movie about loss. That was a theme, about letting go to something you loved. But I don't know if I can pinpoint or say the exact moment where I knew it was going to be a story about a marriage and grief and the death of this husband and this woman who had to move forward on her own. I knew that there needed to be a reason thematically why this woman was giving her horse away. I knew that. So I thought, well, maybe it's because she's divorced and her husband left her and now she can't afford her horse. And Andrea, my cinematographer, who I keep talking about, yes. I had called her, I had pitched the idea to her. I knew this woman was alone in her house, and she was preparing the next morning to give away her horse, and she was now without a spouse. And I told Andrea the whole story of my parents and how my father actually passed away. And I was like, I don't want to do that whole story. That's too close to home. And my director of photography, Andrea, literally probably a week before she flew here, or maybe less, said to me, no, that is the story you have to tell. That's where the heart and the soul of this is. You have to tell that story. Do we care as much if he cheated and just left her? That's not the story. And I knew she was right. Oh my gosh, this is a story about my dad and my mom. And that is what I would call the presence of spirit
Yes.
showing itself and saying, this is the story you're going to tell. And my dad, I know, was present and was part of that. I'm a big believer in this. And some people are, some people aren't, but just my life experience, I'm a believer in being shown signs, and I was shown these signs. So Andrea, we picked her up from the airport. By the way, we barely knew each other. We were like acquaintances. She was just a girl I knew I wanted to work with. And then she's suddenly in my mom's house in Michigan. I still lived in LA at the time. And we're brainstorming on this play. So my writing this screenplay, my writing process was not traditional. I see things in pictures. I'm a very visual person. I was like, this scene, she'll be in the stall. She's going to have a meltdown emotionally after giving away the horse. This scene, she'll be walking down a trail. This scene, we're going to do a flashback with the husband so the audience can connect to their connection and who this man was. But it became a piece about grief and letting go. And the giving away the horse was secondary. But this was about a woman whose husband died. And then I realized, as a director, as a storyteller, this piece was to help people who have lost a spouse, specifically women who had to experience becoming widows way before their time. My dad was 46 when he died. My mom was his exact same age. They had been together since 14 years old. They're 46. And all of a sudden, she had this great life partner, all these plans, and then boom, the rug gets pulled out from under her. So the message in Secret is, how do you keep going after insurmountable loss? And what roles do animals play in people's healing? And what role does nature play in people's healing? What role does God play in people's healing? And my mother was a huge part of the writing process, the collaborative process. Her and I talked out this film for a few years. And then once it became about my dad, she was like, this isn't the story we were normally telling, because he's a very private person. And we started with, right? And I was like, but this is bigger than us. This is the story that wants to be told. And then once Secret got into the festival circuit and started screening in movie theaters where we met, that validation happened because after Q&As, audience members I had never met in my life before, usually women, one woman at every festival throughout the country would come up to me in tears and say, I lost my husband. Thank you for that movie. Or one girl said, I lost my dad. Thank you for that movie. Because it's about, I've never been married, but I know what it's like to lose someone more than life itself, and the grieving process you go through. And I wanted to show the different phases, the denial, the bargaining, depression, anger. And then at the end, you feel that acceptance when I'm walking through the trail and all the yellow leaves and looking up. And on that trail, part of my dad's ashes are spread on that trail where I filmed that final scene. Yeah. So that's right by my hometown. And it was an experience. And if I can give filmmakers another piece of advice, follow your intuition every step of the way. Even if it doesn't make perfect sense and you don't know how it's going to turn out, if something doesn't feel right, listen to that. If something does feel right, listen to that. And I truly believe, Andrea, I told you, we barely knew each other. We've worked a lot since then. But she's sitting in the back seat of my car when I picked her up from Detroit Metro Airport and literally tells me, no, you have to make this scene, this film about this widow. She has to be a widow. Her husband has to have just died. And I know that's how that spirit world works. It uses people sometimes to give you a message. You have to do this. And you have to do what's scary and what's hard. If you're going to write dramatic narrative film, short or full-length feature, You have to go all in and be willing to be really vulnerable, get ugly,
Yes.
not worry about perfection. And that's, I think you asked, why do you think Secret was so successful in the
Yeah.
festival circuit? Because it was real, it was authentic, and everybody, unfortunately, if people have not lost someone in their lifetime, unfortunately, they're going to. None of us are getting out of this alive, you know? So it's a universal theme that everybody can relate to, but it's not just a depressing movie where it's like, oh, I just watched 15 minutes of a drama and I'm
No.
depressed. Cool. What was the point? The ending, I very intentionally said we have to give this audience hope
Yes.
that there's something beyond this. There's a bigger purpose. And when you're an independent female and you're kind of alone in the world, or you feel alone in the world, how do you keep going? And for me, I've experienced a lot of loss in my life, starting with my father, who was, you know, a person that I loved more than life itself, and he was amazing, and people I know still talk about him to this day. I've channeled coping with grief through my art, through storytelling. It's like Carrie Fisher said, take your broken heart and turn it into art. That's what happened with Secret. So that's, I mean, originally I thought I was going to show a 5-minute film about a woman saying goodbye to her horse on her trailer, and that was it. And it turned into a bigger project.
Yeah.
It turned into a 15-minute film about grief.
Well, it was bigger than, like you said, you were doing something that was bigger than yourself. And so the
Yes.
story had to be told that way for
Right.
it to be that effective. And I love hearing
Yes.
the backstory of that. So do you think everything that you learned through all the pre-production that you work with Andrea and you started, I mean, this really starts who now Shana is as a storyteller and a director. Do you think that a lot of that went into your thought process when you are now home because of COVID and you start to think about how can you cope with this, and then you come up with this idea, let me just reach out to some people about this poem that I love by Maya Angelou, and Still I Rise. I mean, what's going through Shana's mind when you start to come up with this? And I don't know, I always tell people maybe it's a rendition, I don't know, but the way that you came across it, it was almost like it was a passion project,
Yes, 100%. And I would say anything I've done as an independent filmmaker has been a passion project, because if it's not, why do it? You know, I mean, if I'm directing and producing it, I haven't been paid. I'm just doing it because I have to do it, you know? So you asked, like, what's my thought process and how did I even, come up with this concept for filming Still We Rise? Where did this come from? So what happened was, yes, we're in Michigan now, fast forward to 2020, we're in a pandemic. Here we are. No one could have predicted this. And it was March, and I was actually working a corporate job, a day job, just to get the bills paid, at a staffing agency as a staffing manager, like account manager. And it's a really big global organization. It's been around since the 1940s, big company. I actually first heard about it when I lived in LA. A lot of my friends and colleagues had worked there. So they had a Michigan office, started working there in January. And the pandemic hit Michigan. Here's what happened. Most of my friends are still LA based. I'm still like getting back here, slow but sure. So in my Facebook feed and the news feed and everything, I'm hearing what's going down in Los Angeles first. We all hear pandemic or coronavirus has hit the state of Washington first. We all know it started in Washington for the United States. All right. We all know we're in trouble in the back of our minds. It's not going to stay in Washington. Then I started hearing while I was at work, on my break, looking up at my phone, oh, the mayor of Los Angeles or the governor of California just declared a state of emergency for California. This is when I started getting nervous. I was like, oh, no. That's my other home, and it's going to come to the Midwest, and it's coming to the East Coast. This is a matter of time, right? I'm in the office. A couple weeks later, not even, the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, announces a state of emergency for us. I remember before that even, I heard about the first case in Michigan. It was in Oakland County where I live. The news is trying to downplay it. Oh, it's confined. She's good. She's in quarantine. She's in the hospital. She's in isolation. She's doing good. And I was like, we're not good. We're not good. We are not good. And I just, again, intuition, I was like, the anxiety was mounting. So going into an office, our desks were all in close quarters. We had these cool standing desks. They were new. My department was full of amazing women, all these diverse backgrounds, just women that are good with people, good at sales. And it just was getting nerve-wracking working in close quarters with people, because I read up on science and I know how coronavirus spreads. I'm like, we're not getting it yet here. I meant we're not understanding how serious this is, because I had followed the news in China months prior to that. So fast forward, we are told, take your laptops home. The company's going to work from home. A little bit of relief with that. Cool. All right. This is the beginning of March, around March 11th, 12th of this year. But what I also knew as a business professional, that the business was plummeting quickly, because with a staffing agency, if a business hires us to bring on accountants or bookkeepers or things like that, they're paying fees to pay for a staffing agency. When I'm calling people, they're saying, I just laid off half my staff. We can't afford a staffing agency. This is not an essential business. So I was like, we're all about to get laid off. I could feel it. We were told we weren't going to get laid off. Our jobs were safe. We were fine. But I knew we were going to get laid off. And I actually had a dream that was a straight up premonition the night before it happened, that I was in a Skype meeting with my boss at the time, and she was laying everyone off. The next day, we all had a calendar invite, all of us individuals on our Outlook calendars that said COVID-19 update at this time. And we started getting texts from colleagues and everything saying it's going down. And I was just, I think my boss was a little caught off guard by how calm I was and not surprised. And I was like, I'm not surprised. I saw this coming, because I already saw this conversation with her in a dream. And I just also knew intuitively that we just didn't have it wasn't an essential business, because, you know, people are going, we need hospital workers, we need people at grocery stores. What's essential at the peak of the stay-at-home orders? So everyone, it was a mass layoff. I want to say, I know it was global. People who had been there 30 years were laid off around the country. Like, most people lost their jobs at this company. And I wasn't I had friends who worked as restaurant managers. A close girlfriend of mine called me and she said, I was laid off, and this was like 2 weeks before me. So I knew it was coming. Mm-hmm. So after this layoff happened, it's overwhelming. It's very sad to lose your income, and it's more scary to be in a dangerous world where there's infectious disease spreading and killing people. And I had to kind of program myself, turn off your social media, turn off the news. And in times of stress, I look to inspiration from women I admire and look up to. And I intuitively was like, I'm going to pull up some Maya Angelou right now. I went on YouTube and I pulled up Still I Rise, the poem Still I Rise. I've heard it many times. But before it was a reading of her reading her poem. But before she read it in this clip, she had this message. And it's at the beginning of my piece, Still We Rise, where it's her voiceover. And she's saying, everyone in the world at one point or another has gone through fear or pain or loss or disappointment, yet each of us has awakened and risen. And it's something about the human spirit, whatever that abides in the human spirit that keeps us going. And then she says, black and white, thin, fat, Native American, Asian, Black, we rise. Like all these diverse groups. She had this message. And I remember it was very cathartic for me. I broke down sobbing, because Maya will do that with her tone, her delivery, her voice, her power. She is just was otherworldly. And it was like secret. This project chose me as a vessel, and I thought, you have a message that's bigger than you, and you need to do this. And it happened quickly because I thought,
Yes.
the world needs to hear this right now during coronavirus, what Maya said in that clip. And I knew I wanted to cast a very large, diverse global cast reciting the words of Still I Rise. And I just I kind of slammed on the gas and allowed my creative world wheels to turn. I'm never completely clear on how a project's going to turn out until it's over.
Mm-hmm.
But you were one of the people I spoke to because I had doubts. I wasn't sure. Am I allowed to do this? Should I do this? And you gave me great advice. You said you said something like Maya was about the healing and inclusivity of all people. And you have a great opportunity to deliver this message. And I was honored to cast you in the project. And I got a great editor, Randy J. Williams. He was all about it. And he felt like it was a sign too, because he had talked to a colleague at his work. He's a great editor, great graphic designer, director of photography, filmmaker, but he's also an essential worker. And this guy's pulling like 14-hour days, wearing a mask at work, working in a Myers warehouse, and then on his afternoons, nights, and weekends, editing for me because he believed in this project. And he had just had a conversation with a colleague about diversity right before I called him and pitched this piece to him. And we just collaborated, and I just had 115 people from around the world. We were all in the stay-at-home order, film themselves on their phone, whatever line I assigned to them. I think your line is, I am the dream. Great line. I am the dream.
That's the one I like. I'm like, oh, I like you.
It's a great line. Yeah. And everyone emailed me their clips, and Randy was like, oh man, I've never had this much footage in my life, like all this. And I was like, I know, but and we were at the stay-at-home order, and he lives kind of far away from me. He's in Monroe, which I want to say is like an hour and a half away.
Wow.
We never got together. We never sat side by side. This is through texting and phone calls and emails. Him and I edit this piece. And he also said, hey, I have a surprise. And he came up with this, I didn't know he was going to do this gorgeous poster where he put a bunch of the people that were in this piece. And I feel like when you have a positive idea that's going to help heal people, and it's a global message, just like Secret, it has universal themes. On my Facebook, I was posting casting calls like, hey, I need a Native American individual, DM me. Somehow through networking, through my Facebook, I end up on the phone with women who are First Nation, Native American in Big River, Canada, and they're in the piece. I've never met these women. And they, one lady, she's amazing. She said, these two sisters are in it, and she sent me her daughter, who's at the very beginning of the piece, who in her native tongue says, Still I Rise, and then says it in English. And I didn't know I was going to get that footage. And I was like, she's going at the beginning, right after the nurses. She needs to go at the beginning. And I think that just, that is, it goes hand in hand with what we discussed about Secret. The best stories start to tell themselves. And then when we finally launched it on Facebook, we went live, I believe, April 24th. And April is Poetry Month, which was perfect for this. We did a Facebook Live reveal of it. And within 3 days, we got 35,000 Facebook views and eventually made the front page of the Detroit News. So it was like, and people leaving comments saying, oh my gosh, this is so great to see something positive. I was about to quit Facebook. I can't take the negativity or the bad news or the stress anymore. Thank you. I needed to see this. I'm bawling, and I'm reciting Still I Rise. Or some people that I know that, maybe they hadn't been exposed to poetry. Maybe they weren't familiar with that poem. People always think, oh, everyone knows Maya Angelou. Everyone knows that poem. It's not true.
No.
So it was an opportunity to share it and to induce or inspire healing through poetry, which is another thing I love.
Yeah.
And I think it's like when you put out positive things into the world, you're going to attract people who are hard workers and want to be part of a positive message. I cast my former high school teachers were in it. My high school film teacher, theater teacher, Spanish teacher, they're in it. And they were like, yes, we would be honored to recite any Maya Angelou. And I was just getting, and I got to cast people who gave me my first opportunities. And we were all of a sudden like colleagues, and I wasn't their student. You know, it was just a super positive experience. And I just have so much respect and admiration for Maya Angelou. And I had no idea listening to her poem, because I was sad about losing my job. I was going to start a project, but you know, by losing my job, it opened up the space for creativity to do what I'm supposed to be doing and to be able to focus on that. So
yeah. You mentioned that one of the main reasons that you ended up in Los Angeles is because although Michigan has a wonderful theater presence, they lack in film and television presence. So one of the things that I've noticed that you've been doing a lot, along with the other creative things that you've been doing, is that you've been trying to really push production to come to Michigan. And is this one of the main reasons why it's so important to you?
Because there was such a lack of film and television here that I felt like I had to move 3,000 miles away from my family to do what I wanted. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, if you compare 2004 to 2020, we're in different planets, right? Because of the internet and accessibility to remote communications. Look at us. I'm in Michigan, you're in California. We're having a live conversation. I was able to cast 115 people from around the world in a piece and have an audience, and have people from Germany, Australia, Canada, and everyone's sitting there and watching something. We're part of a unified experience, which wouldn't have happened in 2004. 2004 was, you want to be an actor, you want to be a filmmaker, New York or LA. Those are your choices, period, right? And that was true back then. It was. But a number of years later, now I'm going, you know what, even though I lived in LA when I filmed Secret, part of what the audience loved about that film is not just the story, it's the atmosphere. They're going, you can't get that in a film studio. We filmed in the summer, in June, and then again in October on the same trail where the flashbacks with the husband, it's the green plush trees. And then in the present moment, she's releasing his spirit or grieving, and you're in the yellow trees of the fall. And people at the film festival audiences would say, where did you film that? It was so beautiful. Were you in the East Coast, or were you in Connecticut? And I was like, no, I'm in Detroit. That's Detroit. And Detroit has such a bad reputation for being, oh, it's only rough. It's only inner city. It's only bad areas. And I'm like, Greater Metro Detroit is huge, you know? And I'm like, it has, I love that we have all 4 seasons. I even love the winter, you know, like, because winter is beautiful and the snow is beautiful. And I love the summers and I love the falls. And I feel like that it was like a part of my cast, the nature. That kind of told, like, the way the leaves would blow. And there was just, Andrea would say this too, there was some sort of magic that was happening in the state of Michigan, in the landscapes that the lakes. And I just feel like people out here, there's so much talent in the state of Michigan, and that's just the state I'm passionate about because it's where I'm from. I felt I was spiritually led back home. I don't feel like it was a conscious decision. I started getting signs. I'm big on signs. And last year my grandmother passed away, and I wanted to be here during her last year. I just wanted to be present. And I was working remotely for my job, and I could take my laptop and work from home and still be with her. And I held on to my LA apartment for a long time and was paying for rent when I wasn't staying there. But I realized I'm being pulled here to do something bigger for this community. And I think that up and coming talent, people who want to be acting and directing in film and television and producing, like, this is a great place to make movies. And Michigan got a piece of the industry. In case my fellow Michigander filmmakers ever see this podcast, around the recession, I want to say sometime between 2009 and like 2011, maybe early 2012, I was living in LA, but Michigan was the Midwest Hollywood for a tiny period of time because the tax incentives for filmmakers came here. So I was getting calls from home saying, hey, Debbie Moore and Ashton Kutcher are at our Dairy Queen down the street. They're filming a bunch of stuff here. They're building film studios in Pontiac. This is awesome. And then what happened was our elected officials decided to pull the tax incentives. And with that went the industry. And the argument I've had with fellow Michiganders in my community, people I love and care about, is, they would say, oh, they wanted to build the industry out here, but they were flying people from out of state or from LA and they weren't employing people here in Michigan. And I'm like, you need to give time and industry time to build and to marinate. Of course, they're gonna fly in experts who have been doing this for years, but they started developing film programs at colleges, and more people were getting involved in film that maybe wouldn't have before because it was here, and they were getting onto film sets. And I mentioned Randy Williams, the editor I've worked with many times, and he started getting involved in extra work on film and before he attended film school. And I lived in LA for many, many years as an independent filmmaker, and some of the most talented filmmakers I have ever worked with are Michigan based, because even though I lived in LA, when I filmed Secret, my editor for Secret, his name is Matt Huizinga. He lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan. That's West Michigan. And he's one of the best editors I have ever worked with. And he edited Secret, and he runs his own production company. And there's talent everywhere. And you shouldn't feel like, in this day and age with access to the internet and access to new technology and YouTube and production and independent production, that if you don't want to move super far away from your family, you shouldn't have to. I'll never regret moving to LA. I love Los Angeles, and I became who I was out there. Like, I grew up out there. But I never thought that if someone told me, oh, you're going to become a homeowner in 2019 and you're going to move right back to your hometown. If someone told me that 2 years ago, I'd be like, you're out of your mind. It's not going to happen. But my intuition led me back. Now I'm in a pandemic, so I feel a little bit paralyzed creatively because I can't assemble a huge film crew right now, but we had projects like Still We Rise. I have another small project in the works right now, but I'm not ready to talk about it yet because I'll believe it when I see it. I don't know if it's going to come to fruition. It has to be meant to be. So we'll see. But I just want to give Michiganders a chance and local Detroit people a chance to showcase their talent. And I think there's stories to be told here, not only by the talent that exists here behind the camera and in front of the camera, but also just the land, the seasons. It's got its own personality. Here. It's that, it really is. And on the big screen, which you saw, the cinematography of Secret is meant to be watched on the big screen. It's awe-inspiring. I've seen my film a million times, but when I watch that cinematography and just nature doing its thing, it's not in a studio. I'm like, well, we need to make more movies here. We need to make more production here, for sure. So.
Wow, I love that. Okay, so there's a project that's in the works that we're not going to talk about yet.
I'm not quite ready yet.
That's okay.
There's another project.
But I definitely know, and I know people listening to this podcast will want to know, is there a project you can talk about now? I'm thinking about one in the back of my head. So we want to know what's next for Shana.
Yeah. So what I will say about the smaller project that will be more like a short film, or maybe even shorter than a short film, I do want to say one thing about it, the unnamed project, is that if it comes to fruition, and we'll talk about it when it happens, I have a Zoom meeting tomorrow about it with my director of photography and someone in the cast. The intention behind that project too is to uplift and heal people, and it's a positive message. And I think as the director of it, I'm still kind of figuring it out. I think it's not fully figured out yet. So that's what's going on. That's a process, but I think it's good to share that with any filmmaker watching, because that's very typical when you're like, I'm trying to figure this out. Is this meant to be? Like, we don't know, you know? But the next project I think you're leading toward is a project called Maude. It's MAUDE. And this is actually, this project is, again, we said Secret was bigger than me. This is definitely bigger than me. Maud is a full-length feature film, or it might be a miniseries. We're kind of leaning toward miniseries. It is based on the international best-selling book by my aunt, my mom's eldest sister. Her name is Donna Foley Mabry. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Kindle. I narrated the audiobook. It's on Audible. If you like,
Audible,
I love
definitely Audible.
Yes, it's on Audible. I love listening to audiobooks because I like to go for long drives or like if I'm hiking, or I just like to listen to
But
audio.
it was so good on Audible. I got both, but Audible was so phenomenal.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I laugh about it. I'm a little modest and embarrassed because it's the first time I've ever recorded an audiobook. And recording an audiobook is very hard in my experience, because you think it's going to be easy, and then you realize it's not that easy. And Maud is such an epic story. I mean, I was reading not just for the character of Maud, but the men, the women, and then they're in the South, and then they end up in Detroit, and like there's a lot going on in there. But so Maud is it's a true story based on my aunt's grandmother's life. My aunt's grandmother was Maud. People ask about my family tree when I talk about Maud. Complex. My maternal grandmother is in Maud. Her name is Evelyn. That was her name in real life. She is only 16 years old in the book when she's pregnant with my Aunt Donna. But my aunt and my mother had different fathers. So I have no real relation to Maud genetically. None. I have a relation to Donna, the author.
Yes.
But Maud was her maternal grandmother, and just, someone she loved more than life itself. And she was a huge influence in Donna's life. And Donna's a very prolific author. She's written a lot of fiction, fun, murder mystery. She's written everything under the sun, and she's been an author for many years. And she has a huge fan base. But Maud is her nonfiction, true story of her grandmother's life. Her daughter Melanie said, she told her these stories about her grandmother her whole life. She's like, you need to write this down.
Oh, yeah.
And then Maud is what, even though Donna was already an established author, by the time she published Maud, I think it was around 2015, this is the book that helped her career skyrocket to literary celebrity. Again, it brings me back to Secret. I always say the best stories are true.
Yes.
The best stories are true. Like when people say, I couldn't write this. And I just believe that. I think that's what people connect to, and that's why people loved Maud's story. Because you go from the time she's 7 years old at the beginning of the book to the end of her life in her 80s. And we go through the Spanish flu, talk about a pandemic.
I know.
I've connected that. I'm like, oh my gosh, Maud went through this, and now we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Crazy. And then the Great Depression, she goes from Tennessee, and then she gets married and moves to Missouri. And then because of the Great Depression, everybody loses their jobs. Sounds very familiar to what I just said about 2020. Her husband loses his job, and they have to go to Detroit. So they're taking a Model T there, and then eventually their car breaks down and they have to walk the rest of the way to Detroit.
My favorite part, my second favorite part of the book. The first one is when she votes.
Yes! Oh, that part is so good.
Yes. So I mean that this, when you said that this needs to be, or you're thinking about a series, it needs to be a series.
Okay, thank you for saying that. I hope Donna watches this podcast and she'll hear this too, and her fans. And yeah, because a full-length feature film, you can do a 3-part film with an intermission, and you can do that 3-hour film, but like you don't want to, Maud's not the type of story where you want to cut out too much storyline or edit, and then the readers are disappointed. So you want to take your time with it. So I agree. Like I always wanted it to be in a big movie theater, which maybe it still can be, but I do think it needs to be a series as well, because it's such an epic story, and you feel like as the reader, you're walking through her life.
Mm-hmm.
And when she votes, it's such an exciting thing because it means so much to her as a woman to finally have the right to vote. And I remember Donna wrote in those chapters, some women were getting beaten by their husbands for voting, or even saying they wanted to vote. And Maud's husband, George, at the time was just like, was kind of annoyed. She was like, I'm going to go do this, and he didn't do much about it, but it's just such a meaningful moment for women. And it's a reminder of how far we've come. But not only did just my family circumstances and a short film lead me back to Detroit, Maude did, because it's important to me to film at least a significant portion of the film in Michigan and in Detroit proper, when she's with her daughter at one point, who's going into the bars on Jefferson Avenue in Detroit. Like, this is a Detroit story. And I think if this film was given to a different director who isn't from Michigan, he or she would say, let's go where the tax incentives are. Where's the cheapest to film this? The film Detroit, directed by Catherine Bigelow, I don't know if you ever saw that. Did you ever see that film?
I did.
I was so disappointed to hear that so much of it was filmed in Massachusetts. I don't know if that's fact, but I know some of it was filmed in Detroit and so much of it was in Massachusetts because of tax incentives. And I was like, you made a movie called Detroit. Film it here. It
seemed to lack a lot of Detroit in the Detroit movie. I felt that way too.
I agree. And it feels like Michigan always gets snubbed like that. It's always the underdog. And I'm just like, enough with that. Like, you're going to film a movie called Detroit. Film a significant portion here. Make it happen. You guys have the funding. I understand tax incentives are important. But so with Maude, that leads me to kind of my journey with this film. We decided to film a proof of concept teaser trailer. And friends and family of mine who had seen, and colleagues who had seen Secret and loved Secret and knew, my mother and I paid for that film out of pocket, by the way. I just paid for that film out of my day job, and I used my PTO days, and I was like, hey, I'm on set. I said to my fellow manager, text me if you need anything. I'm gonna go shoot this movie real quick. But with Maude, I didn't, the teaser trailer, I didn't do any kind of, for the teaser trailer, to film that, I didn't do any kind of crowdfunding or anything. I did one Facebook status, very passive, and I said, hey, if anyone's interested in helping us produce our next film, DM me. I was very shy about it. And then I got phone calls from people who wanted to help us with funding, who believed in me as an artist. And I hate listing names when I don't have a name in front of me, but I know a couple of the executive producers that helped us film the teaser trailer was my dear friend Maria Marcotte. Heidi Rhodes was an executive producer for the Maude teaser trailer to make that happen. My friend Deborah Edwards donated, and Donna Foley-Mabry, the author herself, also donated so that we could film this. Because I wanted to film just a proof of concept piece that kind of showed, okay, what can this film crew and this cast do with this story? Just like a 5-minute thing. So I cast Donna. We flew her out to Detroit from Vegas, where she lives. And we were able to film right in Detroit at Forest Lawn Cemetery, right where Maude is actually buried, at her stone. And Donna had never seen her grandmother's stone until we were rolling.
Wow.
So all those emotions she feels, in that teaser trailer are real. And it was funny being my aunt's director, because I went up to her and I thought, okay, maybe I'll give her some notes or inspiration, and she was like, I don't need any of this, just go roll. She is just a natural. She was just like,
it's a special talent to direct family. Yeah.
And I think it's a good note for directors to know when you don't need to direct.
Yes.
Know when to step back and go, she's got this or he's got this. There's moments where actors need some feedback and they need some help, and I directed the Maude teaser trailer, and I'll tell you, the scene where I chopped my hair off, Andrew was there filming. We're in the woods by a river. Go ahead. It looks like you want to say something.
No, I said that's why that's my second favorite part of the book, because
where she chops her hair off. Me too. When they're like, we have to walk the rest of the way to Detroit, and she's had it. This woman is so proper.
And so people watching, if you're like, I don't know what they're talking about, that's because you need to go and read the book.
You need to read the book. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And I love that scene, and I chose to showcase that scene in the teaser trailer because it's this moment where our main character, throughout the film, she's so introverted and always talking to God and soft-spoken and reserved, and she loses it and just chops her hair off and throws it into the stream. And I was like, All right, yes, that moment. I get it. And that moment, I have to say, as an actor and director, I acted and directed myself in secret. That is the hardest scene I have ever had to direct and act in my life. In that moment, I was like, I don't know if we did a lot of takes, and I could feel it when I was forcing it or where the acting was pushed, and I was just losing confidence, and I was like, I need a director, that's not me. And shout out to my DP, Andrea. We sat in my car. She was like, let's warm up. All that matters is what's happening to Maud in this moment. Stop worrying about your crew being cold or hungry. You have to stop doing that stuff. You just need to be Maud in this moment. And she just gave me the best pep talk of my life. And then we got the scene that we used in the final take. So that's what happens when you have a really small indie film crew, but when you guys are such hard workers and you have each other's backs and you know what someone needs in a moment. And I was so appreciative of her for that, because I knew that I can't fake this moment. This can't be, I can't be halfway there. Like, this is such an important scene in this book, and she's just at her limit emotionally, physically. She's dirty, she's frustrated, they're broke. They're literally like stealing pieces of corn to feed themselves, or going to a gas station and sharing pieces of bread with their children. Like, it's just her at a breaking point, and it shows how hard the depression really was. And yeah, I think by the time their car broke down, I don't want to misspeak, but I think they were still in Ohio. Like, they were far away. Far away.
Yeah, they had to walk a long time. They had to walk a
Yes.
very long time. So
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna make sure that, because you have a fan page for Maud, we want to make sure we get all of that information and put that
Okay, perfect.
in the link when we upload this, so that people can follow it, that they can follow you, the acting coach, because
I'm an acting coach.
Yes, I mean, we want to make sure that everybody, because that's why I definitely I wanted you for She Talks Cinema, because you have so many different sides to Shana that's so important that women need to see. And so that's why it's so important. You're welcome. That's why it's so important to have you on this podcast. So thank you so much. It was so delightful. This is because I haven't seen you so long, but it was so delightful. And I mean, I learned so much more about you, but there's so many ways with what you've shared with us today of how we can support you. And you'll let us know when the other project's about to, start, but we can support you now in supporting your mission to get more production to Michigan, and then this movie Maud that definitely needs to be told. So there's so much.
Can I add something real quick?
Absolutely.
Just so that I don't forget, just because there's so many moving parts with the Maud teaser trailer, I do want to acknowledge we eventually did do crowdfunding last summer. We did a huge Indiegogo. And again, this is a great opportunity to thank, even you contributed, to thank everyone who contributed, anything from $10 to $2,000. We raised $28,000 from an Indiegogo in 2 months. And the point was to really showcase that teaser trailer, to get it out into the world. And where we're at now, just to put the message into the universe, is because, we wanted to maintain that creative control and put out this creative team's message. But this will be a multi-million-dollar film. And we're now looking for executive producers and a network like Amazon Prime or Hulu or Netflix or HBO to really back us and get behind us once. In a pandemic, I don't know if it's until we get the vaccine, that's a whole other conversation. In a pandemic, once it's safe, first and foremost, to assemble a huge film crew and actors, because we can't film Maud with people standing 6 feet apart wearing masks. We need to be able to, so that's where we're at with the project. And we know that due to coronavirus, a lot of things have been paused, but we haven't forgotten about it. And I have associate producers working on the project behind the scenes. And, but yeah, we'll include all the Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook links that you can follow. And just thank you. I wanted to add that. So
no, and I think that's really important, because people want to know what's happening in Hollywood right now behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And in fact, the person that I interviewed before you, Cindy Cowan, she talked a little bit about how everything was on hold,
Yeah.
production wise, but it doesn't stop the pre-production and the planning. And so
Exactly.
people want to know that you are continuing to work the process. And so that's
Yes,
glad
absolutely.
you said that. That's actually a really
Yes.
good question I should have asked.
Yeah.
But thank you so much
No,
for
but it
saying
worked out.
that.
Of
Well,
course.
Shana, thank you so much again for
Thank
being on
you.
She Talk Cinema.
Of
And
course.
make
Thank
sure
you for having
everybody,
me.
yes, and make sure everybody like this podcast with Shana so that we can definitely get more people learning more, not only about Shana, about her projects, about Maud, about Still We Rise, and last but not least, this phenomenal short film that I saw several times because I loved it, Secret. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Shana, thank you so much for your time. And,
Thank you.
we'll be in touch. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye.
Angela.
Oh, you're
Bye.
welcome. Bye.